Alignment is a subject that gets discussed a lot, and what I usually see happen is people arriving at the conclusion that alignment doesn't really make any sense. Which is fine if you're trying to put every possible character and all their varied motivations into 9 boxes. Of course, you're going to have a lot of characters that don't feel like they really fit. And, it makes sense that a system like that wouldn't cover everything, but that sort of leaves us with an unsatisfying answer, which is that alignment doesn't matter. So, what do we do with it? Where do we go from here? How do we make it useful? So, I'm going to start off with my take on law versus chaos, because I think that's probably the more interesting axis, at least as far as the way I do things. I think most people already kind of know, where they think good and evil are on the list, but, what law is and what chaos is, I think is a little bit different than what people instinctively think it ought to be. So I think when most people look at law and chaos, they either see it as a measurement of your character's willingness to break laws. If you're very lawful, then you will follow the laws. If you're very chaotic, then you don't care. The other is when your character has a strict internal code that they follow, whether or not they are very consistent. Do they follow their own internalized laws and not necessarily the laws of the land? The first one gets a bit silly when you consider that there are societies in D&D in which evil things are legal. Based on that, you might expect a lawful paladin to uphold those evil laws. It's a bit difficult to picture a paladin of Pelor rounding up slaves just because that's the thing that legally you're required to do, even though to a god like Pelor, slavery is abhorrent. So the second option can work. It allows Batman-like characters to disobey unjust laws or laws that they think get in the way of their own moral code. But it still breaks down when you think that there are plenty of strict moral codes that a person could follow, but to any outside observer are complete and utter madness. They're indistinguishable from chaotic characters as long as their internalized code bends towards chaos. And to me, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, I'm of a mind that it probably is one. So what is lawful? How do we define that? My method of thinking about law is rooted in the specific worlds that I make, and exactly what law is will change fairly dramatically depending on the setting. But I think it's fairly easy to understand. Law is a fundamental belief that the system works, and that the places where it is failing or bad are a result of bad people and not the system itself being bad. The cruelties of an evil kingdom are due to an evil king, and not some inherent problem presented by feudal society. It's a belief that there must be a king somewhere out there who is an heir to the throne that would be better than the evil king. And that is your solution to that kind of problem. Now, this belief is kind of weird if you come from a democratic republic like most people in the real world. We know that feudalism isn't really the ideal way of organizing countries, at least not if you're anyone but the royals. That isn't the way that people at the time felt necessarily, though. If you went back in time with grand notions of elections and universal suffrage, you would be viewed as an agent of chaos, sowing revolution in the ears of peasants and trying to destroy the very fabric of society. You would be chaotic. And that comes down to whether or not you want to change the world, because change is oftentimes kind of chaotic in nature. And so that's basically it. A lawful character who suddenly found themselves in charge would not fundamentally change the world around them and those power structures. They might change rules. They might ban certain things that they find to be evil if they are a good, lawful character. They might make certain evil things legal if they are an evil character. But they won't get rid of the kingdom. Underneath a lawful character, you will still have peasants and merchants, lords and knights, priests and clerics, prophets and kings. So yeah, and I think that kind of breaks down the way I think of law and chaos. The two primary ways in most D&D settings where that comes up are, of course, with kingdoms, which is the fairly easy one to wrap your head around, and the other is religion. Whether or not you think that the religious order is justified and pious.